So, welcome to the class on the Avatamsaka, the first class on the Avatamsaka Sutra. We will have a second class at the end of June, and the end of June. This is the end of May, and if necessary, a third class. But I hope I can say what I want to say in two classes. As the people who have looked at the reading for this class know, it's quite an amazing sutra. You can spend a lifetime on this sutra. You can spend many lifetimes on this sutra. Just to show people physically, this is the Avatamsaka Sutra as translated by J.C. Cleary. This is how thick it is. You can compare it to my face to see how thick it is. Now there are 200 or 300 pages of Cleary's notes, and at the end there's a translation of a discussion of the last chapter from ancient China. But basically the sutra is 1,200 pages of relatively small print on relatively large paper. So it is quite a thing. What I'm going to do mostly in this class, I don't know if I'll do anything else besides this, is I want to talk about how the structure of the sutra, the rhetoric of the sutra, the language of the sutra, the construction of the sutra, the progression of the sutra embodies whatever philosophical or spiritual points the sutra is making. So I'm going to be looking in this class, I'm not going to be discussing ideas particularly. Instead, I'm going to be showing the manifestation of these ideas through the way in which the sutra is written or spoken or chanted. So I'm going to look at this as a writer, as a literary critic. That's how I'm going to look at this. And the first thing to notice is the rhetoric. Oh, and I should say, if you have any questions, either put them in the chat or raise your hand. And if I don't call on you immediately, then put it in the chat so that I have a record that you asked a question. Okay. So the prose is incredibly ornate, and I'm going to read a few samples to give you an idea, or to give the people watching the video an idea of how ornate it is. So this is the opening of Book 9, which is called Awakening by Light. And you can summarize this chapter as light pervades the universe. And this light is emanating from various parts of the Buddha's body. Throughout the sutra, sometimes it's, from his forehead, sometimes it's from his feet, sometimes it's from his hands. It's really the Buddha nature is pervading the universe, and it's personified by light. So here's the opening paragraph. Then the Buddha, from beneath the wheel marks on his feet, emitted 100 billion light beams, illuminating this billion-world universe with its 400 billion continents, 100 billion oceans, 100 billion surrounding mountain ranges, 100 billion enlightening beings. That's Cleary's word for bodhisattva. So 100 billion bodhisattvas leaving home, 100 billion Buddhas realizing true enlightenment, 100 billion Buddhas teaching, 100 billion Buddhas passing away, 100 billion polar mountain kings, 100 billion heavens of hosts of celestial kings, 100 billion heavens of 33 celestial realms, 100 billion heavens of timely portion, 100 billion heavens of satisfaction, 100 billion heavens of enjoyment of emanations, 100 billion heavens of free enjoyment of others' emanations, 100 billion heavens of pure hosts, 100 billion light sound heavens, 100 billion heavens of purity, 100 billion heavens of vast rewards, 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form, everything therein was clearly manifest. So it's this incredibly extravagant vision that is happening here. It's extravagant in numbers. Oh, there's a question, can I provide page numbers? Yes, I can provide page numbers, but be warned that on screen it's a different page number. This is the opening of book 9, and in print it's page 282. But the free PDF that I sent out, that omits the introductory material, and so it has a different page number. But I can give the page numbers from the book. So I want to read something else along these lines. This is page 1208 in the book, in the hardcover, and it's the description of Asha, who is one of the beings that Sudana is sent to learn from at the end, and I'll explain a little bit about that later. And it's notable that Asha is a woman. She's a very well-born, well-married woman. She's basically a rich lady, is what she is. So Sudana is sent on this quest to visit various teachers, and it's notable who these teachers are, that is, women, men, and so on. Then Sudana, uplifted by the virtues of the spiritual benefactor, sent forth by the spiritual benefactor, having gained access to the vision of the spiritual benefactor, putting the instructions of the spiritual benefactor into practice, remembering the words of the spiritual benefactor, kindly disposed towards spiritual benefactors, seeing spiritual benefactors as minds of the vision of Buddha, that's minds, M-I-N-E-S, seeing spiritual benefactors as teachers of the elements of omniscience, seeing spiritual benefactors as eyes to see the sky of Buddhahood, gradually made his way to Samantabhadra Park in Samudravatan. He saw the park surrounded by fences made of all kinds of jewels, in the midst of rows of all kinds of jewel trees, adorned throughout with beautiful, delicate flowers like sets of all kinds of jewels releasing pollen, adorned by all kinds of jewel trees, strewn with the various blossoms of the flowers of all kinds of jewel trees, and so on and so forth. And then in the middle of the park was a large mansion called Multicolored Banner, standing on a ground of jewels, adorned with pillars of sapphire, roofed with gold, and so on and so forth. And it goes and describes the mansion, describes the park, and finally, innumerable living beings in all states of existence came from the 10 directions to the laywoman, Asha, who was seated on a golden throne, adorned with a net of pearls from the ocean, wearing a tiara, her wrists adorned with bracelets of gold, more beautiful than that of the heavens, her arms resplendent with jewels of glorious light, wearing earrings of pure deep blue gems, and so on and so forth. And then those who came to her, affected with various sicknesses, filled with various afflictions, immersed in various views, covered by obstructions caused by actions, had their sicknesses alleviated when they saw Asha, their minds freed from the defilement of the afflictions, and so on. So that gives you a sense of the extravagance of the prose language. And then I want to read also in the same line the end of Sudana's journey, which is page 1510 in the hard copy. So this is when Sudana, after he's completed his journey, it's the end of his journey to basically enlightenment, and he sees Samantabhadra, who is the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, closely associated with Vairocana. Then Sudana, contemplating the body of the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra, saw in each and every pore untold multitudes of Buddha lands filled with Buddhas. And each Buddha land he saw the Buddhas surrounded by assemblies of Bodhisattvas. And he saw that all those multitudes of lands had various bases, various forms, various arrays, various perimeters, various clouds covering the skies, various Buddhas appearing, various enunciations of cycles of the teaching. And just as he saw this in each pore, so also in all pores at once, in all the marks of greatness, all the embellishments, all the limbs and parts of the body, and in each he saw multitudes of lands, with as many multitudes of projected bodies of Buddhas as atoms in all Buddha lands, emerging and fulfilling all worlds in the 10 directions, developing beings toward supreme perfect enlightenment. And it goes on and on like that. And this is a really important example. Instead of saying the whole universe is contained in each atom, and each universe is made of atoms, and so there's this intermingling of the small and the large, and they're found in each other. Instead of lecturing on this, it says this is what he saw, and it describes it. And that's a very important technique of the Avatamsaka Sutra. Instead of lecturing you, they present it as a physical vision, a physical presence. You know, instead of talking about Buddha nature pervades the universe, they say from the Buddha's feet, these rays of light illuminate the universe. So they enact what could be a very dry philosophical vision. And, you know, and it would be very difficult it's very difficult for a mind to contemplate. What do you mean the whole universe is like, you know, in a single point? What can that possibly mean? But they don't worry about that. You know, it just simply presents it. That's it. There's nothing to argue with. It's just, here's how it is. So that's a very important rhetorical technique. And then sort of in contrast, pick up my watch. In contrast, there's poetry. So this is very interesting because it's the prose that is what we call poetic. And it's the verse, the tightly controlled lines that are very spare and philosophical. Not always. Sometimes they get poetic. But a lot of the times they are very spare and philosophical. And in fact, ancient Buddhist philosophy was often written in verse. Nagarjuna is much of Nagarjuna, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, his great work, Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, is written in very tight 4-line stanzas. And the Avatamsaka Sutra likes 4-line stanzas too. And I want to sort of show you how the prose and the poetry come together. And now I'm going to go back to book 9, the Awakening by Light chapter, and I'm going to be on page 284. So here's the prose part, which is what we would ordinarily call poetic, and I'm putting poetic in quotes because that's a lousy definition of poetry, right? But anyway, you know, the really florid sort of passages. Then the light beams passed this world and illuminated 10 lands in the eastern direction, also doing likewise in the south, west, north, the 4 intermediate directions, and the zenith and nadir. And all of these worlds were 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa, and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many bodhisattvas as atoms in 10 Buddha lands, and in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddhas, 10 great bodhisattvas from the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many bodhisattvas as atoms in 10 Buddha lands, came to the Buddha. These bodhisattvas were called Manjushri, etc. The land they came from were called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places, each in the presence of the Buddha in that place, all simultaneously spoke out. No time lap like in Zoom, right? All simultaneously spoke out, saying these verses. Sentient beings lack wisdom, wounded and poisoned by the thorns of craving. For their sake we seek enlightenment. Such is the law of all Buddhas. Seeing all things, giving up extreme, once enlightened, never regressing, they turn the incomparable wheel of truth, and so on and so forth. So then suddenly you go to this very tight, very precise. Sentient beings lack wisdom, wounded and poisoned by the thorns of craving. For their sake we seek enlightenment. Such is the law of all Buddhas. This is very clear. It's very clear, it's very precise, it's very stripped down. Now sometimes this stuff gets florid, but most of the time the poetic section, the verse sections are very, very stripped down, very clear, very direct. And then I want to look on book 20, page 452. And this is extremely important in to Zen. It's you'll recognize it when it comes up. I'm going to start a little bit above it. As is the mind, so is the Buddha. As the Buddha, so living beings. Know that Buddha and mind are in essence inexhaustible. If people know the actions of mind create all the worlds, they will see the Buddha and understand Buddha's true nature. Mind does not stay in the body, nor body stay in mind, yet it's able to perform Buddha work freely without precedent. If people want to really know all Buddhas of all times, they should contemplate the nature of the cosmos. All is but mental construction. Now, how many people recognize that? It's a slightly different translation of something. Yeah, this is in our morning bell chant. If you wish to know all Buddhas of past, present, and future, you should know that the universe is created by mind alone.
What page was that? Sorry.
That's
What?
452.
452?
Yeah. Oh, there's a question here. Does the overall structure of the whole book form an arc? Is it a closed circle? What shape does it? That's a wonderful question, Circa, and thank you for asking it, and I will get to that. Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Okay, so in general, many of the sutras, like the Lotus Sutra as an example, many of the sutras are written where you have this alternation of florid prose and spare poetry. In most of those sutras, the poetry, the verse, is summarizing the prose. Here, the verse is often developing from. It's not summarizing, it's not paraphrasing, it's developing from the prose. Or it can stand independently. So it's a little different relationship. There are places where the verse is summarizing the prose, but more often it stands not exactly independently, but it's its own thing. It's not simply a way to summarize something else. And this metaphor of emission of light from the Buddha's body parts happens in many, many places in this sutra. I just mentioned chapter 9, but it happens in many, many places. So that's sort of an overview of the rhetoric, the language of the sutra. And also I should note the many repetitions in the prose parts. Those are very important because the sutra, all sutras from that early time in Buddhism, and I don't know when this sutra was compiled, certainly at least 2,000 years ago. This sutra, these sutras were meant to be recited. Even spare sutras like the Diamond Sutra were meant to be recited. Yeah, and Jennifer went, like 1,200 pages can you recite? So they were meant to be recited, and you need, so having these repetitions helps you recite them. I don't think they were meant to be memorized, but at least not this one. But it's meant to be recited, and I want to say a little something about that. I know at least two teachers in our school, Barry Briggs and Kathy Park, who have, look at the sutra as a form of practice. I don't know, I don't think either of them does it out loud, but I know that they both go to it. I think Barry does it every day, or used to do it every day, just one page a day or something like that. Go to this sutra just to get this sense of vastness. Because this sutra is obviously, it's very vast, right? Like 100 billion, 100 trillion, chickachillion, whatever, all these worlds and worlds and worlds, and that the whole world is in every pore of a Buddha's body. And in one of these readings we had simultaneously the same Buddha appearing in different universes, and simultaneously Manjushri reciting these words, to these simultaneous Buddhas. So we have, and time also collapses in this sutra. I hope I noted something, but time also collapses, and so this space and time, and it's this vast vision, and also this intimate vision, and so recitation is a way to sort of get it into your consciousness. So reciting the sutra is important, and that affects the way it's written, because the repetitions are the kind of hypnotic, I guess. You keep reciting it and reciting it and reciting. You have, like in Asha's palace, you had all these jewels, right? This was jeweled, and that was jeweled, and this was this kind of jewel, and that was that kind of jewel, and it kind of creates this vision. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the structure, and this is not really getting to Circa's point, but because she wants to know like the arc, but I want to talk about a very simple level of structure. There are assemblies. Every few chapters, an audience is described, and the audience changes from one chapter to another. In minor ways, and I don't want to get into it. It's always a bunch of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and other magical creatures, and sometimes human beings. It's always, this big audience. But where the assemblies take place is very interesting. So at the beginning of chapter 1, we have Shakyamuni Buddha in Magadha under the Bodhi tree. In chapter 2, Shakyamuni Buddha is seated in the Hall of Universal Light and is also still in Magadha under the Bodhi tree. And this is chapter 7. The third assembly, which is chapter 13, the Shakyamuni Buddha is now atop Mount Sumeru, this mystical mountain that's sort of the center of the universe. But he's also in the Hall of Universal Light, and he's also in Magadha under the Bodhi tree. So this is beginning to be, the dog that ate the cat that ate the rat, it's beginning to take on some of this. And then the fourth assembly, chapter 19, the Buddha is now in Yama's realm. So Yama is the ghost king. Oh, and Circa says, Star Trek. I'm not so sure. I'll ask you to explain that later. So he's in the realm of the ghost king, but also atop Mount Sumeru in the Hall of Universal Light and in Magadha under the Bodhi tree. Chapter 23, he reaches the Tushita heaven and Yama's realm and Mount Sumeru and the Hall of Universal Light and in Magadha under the Bodhi tree. In chapter 6, he reaches the parinirvana. He doesn't reach, he just suddenly appears in. I shouldn't say that. It's not like he goes anywhere. He just appears. He appears in the Parinirmatavasarvartan palace. And it was very hard for me to look this up and find out what is it. It turns out it's associated with, on the one hand, devas who are associated with desire. And it's interesting. They're described as that they practice very hard, and they believe in practice, and they believe they're doing the right thing, but they don't want to do anything that's too difficult. and they're still attached to desires. And that sounds like everybody I know who practices, right? Who wants to get up at 3 in the morning? Okay, but anyway, he's in this palace, and now these other places are not mentioned. And then in chapter 27, so that's chapter 26. Chapter 27, he goes back to the Hall of Universal Light. That's the 7th assembly. And chapter 38 is the same, but they're describing the audience, so it's the 8th assembly. And then in chapter 39, which is, I believe, the last chapter. Yeah, that's Sudana's story. That's the last chapter. He's in the Jeta Grove where he taught the most. So back to earth. So all of these places, we've got Shakyamuni Buddha appearing. And this, he's in Yama's realm, but still on Mount Sumeru, and, still in the Hall of, and so on and so forth. This gives you another vision of this collapsing of space and time. And now I want to talk about the cast of characters. So I talked a lot, Shakyamuni Buddha's here, Shakyamuni Buddha's there, Shakyamuni Buddha's someplace else, but the main character in this sutra is not Shakyamuni Buddha, it's Vairocana Buddha. And Vairocana Buddha is the mystical Buddha who is in some sense coterminous with the universe. So Vairocana Buddha is in some sense the embodiment of Buddha nature. It's Vairocana Buddha who pervades every atom, who pervades every inch of space, who pervades our bones and our skin and our minds, who pervades Ramiro's earphones. That's Vairocana Buddha. And Vairocana Buddha appears in our morning bell chant. And our morning bell chant also has a reference. Right after it first mentioned Vairocana, it talks about opening the jeweled text, which would be the Avatamsaka Sutra. And then later it has this thing about mind alone. And I should say mind alone is the sort of chief teaching of the Yogacara school. So Vairocana Buddha never speaks in this sutra, but Vairocana Buddha is what is empowering the various bodhisattvas to speak. So most of this sutra is spoken by Vairocana. It's spoken by bodhisattvas being empowered by Vairocana. Vairocana never says anything, but most of the sutra is spoken by various bodhisattvas. There are only 3 chapters where Shakyamuni Buddha speaks. Number 27, which is the 10 concentrations. I'll get to that. And then chapter 30, which is the incalculable. I'll get to that because it's, for personal reasons, it's in a kind of funny way my favorite. And then in chapter 35, which is the merit of radiant minor attributes, a brief description of Buddhahood in the world. And 27 is very interesting because in 27 there's a chapter 27. This is on page 812. There's an interplay. So it begins, at that time the world-honored one was at the site of enlightenment in a forest in the country of Magadha, that's under the Bodhi tree, having just attained perfect enlightenment. In the hall of universal light, he entered the Buddha's concentration on the absolute instant, and by the inherent spiritual power of universal knowledge, manifested the body of a realized Buddha pure and untrammeled, etc., etc. And then the great enlightening being, the great Bodhisattva, universal I, and I have to say, so Cleary translates the names of all these bodhisattvas so we don't have all this Sanskrit that we can't differentiate, these multisyllabic names that are unfamiliar with us. But because he translates the names, it's hard to know if this is a familiar bodhisattva or not. So I just have to say universal I. Imbued with the spiritual power of the Buddha, rose from his seat, bared his right shoulder, knelt with his right knee on the ground. This is a very standard trope. Joined his palms in respect and said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, I want to ask the completely enlightened one about something. Please permit me to do so." The Buddha said, "You may ask whatever you want. I will explain for you and gladden you." Universal I said, "How many concentrations and liberations have the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra," I know that one, "and the Bodhisattvas who live by the vows and practices of Samantabhadra attained, that they may enter and exit and abide at rest in the great concentrations of Bodhisattvas, and by skillfully entering and emerging from the inconceivable vast state of concentration of Bodhisattvas, are able to command all concentrations with ceaseless mystical powers?" The Buddha said, "Very good, universal I. You are asking this for the benefit of the bodhisattvas of past, future, and present. The bodhisattva Samantabhadra is now here, already capable of freely accomplishing inconceivable effects," and so on and so forth. And then the universal I says to the Buddha, "Where is Samantabhadra now?" And the Buddha says, "Well, he's right here. He has never moved." And so you get this interplay between the Buddha and this Bodhisattva enlightening I, that universal I rather, that keeps going. And this is kind of unusual in this sutra. It's very standard in other sutras. Like the Diamond Sutra is this interplay between the Buddha and Subhuti, right? And there are other sutras where there's this interplay between the Buddha and a bodhisattva, or the Buddha and a disciple of the Buddha. But this is, from what I could find, this was the only one where Shakyamuni Buddha has this kind of interplay between himself and another character. So we have Vairocana, we have Shakyamuni Buddha. I always want to say Shakyamuni Buddhi, but it's not a Shakyamuni Buddha. And then we have the major bodhisattva is Samantabhadra. And another one is Manjushri. Samantabhadra is the overarching sort of down-to-earth principle in this text. He's the bodhisattva who speaks the most often. He's the bodhisattva who's most often referred to. And Samantabhadra is considered an emanation of Vairocana. Samantabhadra and Manjushri are both very, very closely connected with Vairocana. Oh, there's Vairocana and Christian Holy Spirit. I don't know, I'm Jewish. It's a good question. But yeah, this notion of something that infuses, some kind of spirituality, spiritual existence that infuses all beings. I think every religion has that, right? Now I'm forgetting what it's called in Judaism, and maybe the videographer can remember what it's called. But yeah, everybody has that. You're sort of not a religion unless you have this notion of some kind of essence that just pervades everything. Oh, Shekhinah, that's what it is, Shekhinah. Yeah, so this is, that's Vairocana. But anyway, so both Samantabhadra and Manjushri, who is the Bodhisattva of wisdom, are very, very closely connected to Vairocana. And in this sutra, Samantabhadra, so Manjushri is the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and Samantabhadra is the Bodhisattva of action. And that's very important because in this sutra, for all its otherworldliness and all its extravagance, the construction of this sutra is geared towards action in the world. We don't, all these beings, they attain enlightenment, and it's described in these, amazing terms, and they, they will suddenly, something happens. They don't even say what happens. Suddenly some being attains some state, and you have all this extravagance, but it always comes back to action, and Sudana's story is very important to this. And before I go to that, what is the difference between a Buddha and a Bodhisattva? A Bodhisattva, this is the formal definition. A Bodhisattva doesn't go into nirvana. He keeps, or she keeps, coming back and back and back until all beings are saved. A Buddha has realized the final realization. A Bodhisattva says, I don't care, I'm going back. Okay, that's the difference. But is there a difference? Because the Buddha keeps teaching. In this sutra, the enlightened Buddha keeps teaching, right? And these Buddhas obviously are teaching, they're doing stuff. So this is the formal definition, and I think it's kind of like, it's sort of, in some sense, splitting hairs. But yeah, there is this formal difference between a Buddha and a Bodhisattva. Samantabhadra described as shining practice Bodhisattva, says Carol. Yeah, Samantabhadra is a Bodhisattva of action. Often depicted as riding on an elephant holding a parasol, which I think is very cool. But anyway, so the other important characters are the humans. And the humans are Sudana, and slightly mentioned is Subhadra, and I'll get to that. And then Sudana's teachers. So what happens is, towards the end, in the final chapter, chapter 39, called Entering the Dharma Realm, Tony Prince says Vairocana and Manjushri and Samantabhadra are Buddha plus Dharma plus Sangha. Yes, that's one way of putting it. So Dharma means wisdom, so Manjushri is wisdom, and Samantabhadra is action, so action means Sangha. Yeah. And what Ramira's referring to there is Tony Prince's wonderful book, Universal Enlightenment, which he found available on, what was it, on Kindle? Is that right? Yeah, he found it on Kindle. So I highly recommend people do it. Tony Prince is not getting any money from this, and I don't know how he decided how they did this, because he told me, we've corresponded for years. I've been trying to get his book published by major publishers. It was published by like a little local group, and they went out of print, and it's impossible to obtain. I call it unobtainium. But, Shambhala looked at it, Wisdom looked at it, they said, oh, this is a wonderful book, we can't publish it. And so somehow it appeared on Kindle, and Tony Prince was he said, I don't want to make money from this. I'm a Buddhist, I don't want to make money from the Dharma. And I'm like, Tony, you got to get this out in the world. So somebody got it out in the world, but I don't think it's with his imprimatur, because it's missing some stuff. But anyway, it's out in the world, which is fabulous. And anyway, so yeah, I highly encourage everyone to go to Kindle and get it. It comes from a PDF. It's not something that you can like search. You can't do searches and stuff like that. And there's actually a free PDF that I have, but it's missing a lot of stuff, which is why I don't put it out there. Anyway, so okay, so at the beginning of chapter 39, these two children, Sudana and what's her name, Subhadra. Why do I forget Subhadra's name? You'll find out in a minute. They come before Manjushri, and Manjushri's going to send somebody out to all these amazing teachers and I forget how many they are. I gave you a list, and now I can't find my version of the list, but they're like, what, 58 or 60 or something like that. Anyway, he's going to go to one teacher after another. And, basically, Manjushri sort of metaphorically, 53, thank you, Jennifer, metaphorically puts his hands on both kids' heads and says, okay, boy, you go. Girl, stay home. Okay, so that's what happens. And so Sudana goes off on this quest, and this is a standalone chapter. It's what, 100, 150, 200? It's really long. It's a really long chapter. And Sudana meets every one of these people, and now I suddenly realize that I need the list because I wanted to talk about them. Oh, so I have to go to the website. Hold on a minute while I do this. And the important thing about this is that these beings are all kinds of beings. They're rich people. They're poor people. They're male. They're female. They're working class. Here's a list of teachers. Why don't I share this? Okay, let me share this. Share screen. Share. So there they are. We have a male monk, another male monk, another male monk. We have a male grammarian. We have a male, somebody who lives in a meditation community, another male monk. We have Asha, I just talked about her, female lay devotee. We have some kind of male mystic. We have a Brahmin, not even a Buddhist. We have a young girl. We have a male mendicant. We have a young boy. We have another female laywoman. We have a male householder, another male householder. We have a perfumer. That's a working class job. We have a king. We have another king. We have another woman. We have another mendicant, another perfumer. We have a mariner. That's interesting. We have a city elder. We have a nun. We have another laywoman. We have another male householder. We have Avalokiteshvara. Hey, how's that? A male bodhisattva. We have a traveler, a man. We have a male deva. We have a female earth goddess. We have a female night goddess. We have a female night goddess. Oh, I skipped something here. I wanted to point something out. I think, maybe I haven't gotten to her yet. Okay. We have another female night goddess, another female night goddess, another female night goddess, a whole bunch of female night goddesses, one after another. We have a young girl. We have Queen Maya, and boy, the description of Queen Maya, that's really quite something. We have a female goddess from the 33rd heaven. We have another man, a teacher. We have another man. We have another lay woman. We have a goldsmith. We have a male householder, male householder, male Brahmin. We have a boy and a girl. We have Maitreya and Manjushri at the very end. And then at the very, very end, we have Samantabhadra. And what I'm looking for is Vasumitra, female laywoman. Ha! Prostitute. Okay? So she's quite something I can stop. Well, I'll leave this. Well, I can stop sharing. So she's quite famous. Koreans call her past a million. The idea is that she slept with over 1 million men in her lifetime. And when you slept with her, when you had intercourse with her, you never wanted intercourse again. All you wanted was to become, a bodhisattva. You just had this great Bodhichitta would arise from you. So she used sex as a teaching tool in the folk legend, although she does not sleep with Sudana. Anyway, so that's quite, the others are preponderance of mystical beings like the night goddesses and the, stuff like that. And there's a lot of monks and stuff like that, but there's also, a mariner and a couple of goldsmiths and, stuff like that. There's a bunch of women and even some kids. So this is extremely important. There's just male and female, I'm sorry. There's no trans. There's no non-binary. Nothing like that. Yeah. So anyway, so the point to make about this is that what better way to teach that all beings have Buddha nature and that all human beings have the potential to become Buddhas than to take a varying list of people like that and make them teachers of Sudana as he goes on his path to enlightenment. So this is another example of where the sort of dry philosophy, everybody has Buddha nature. If you practice hard, you can become Buddha, becomes embodied in this text. You don't have to say it. It's obvious, When you have a prostitute and she has this incredible description, I should have marked the page to read it. And she has this incredible description, and all the working girls working for her have the same kind of incredible description. They were all like bodhisattvas, I mean, that's it. That's the message right there. Reminds of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting observation. Okay. So that's the cast of characters. And then another important aspect of the text, which again is embodying a teaching without having to say the teaching, is the lists. There are many, 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 many lists in this sutra. And I created a selected list of lists. It does not by any means encompass all of them. Chapter 15 has the 10 abodes, and I'm not sure what abode means here. I think it means sort of the ground of practice or something, but I'll tell you what they are. Awakening bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is the aspiration to enlightenment. Awakening bodhicitta, preparing the ground, practice, noble birth in the sense of spiritual noble birth. Skillful means clear mind, non-regression, simplicity. That non-regression means you don't go back and be reborn a snake. Simplicity, crown prince of the Dharma, and consecration. And I don't want to go into any of those in any detail because that's another discussion. But we have these lists of the 10 abodes or the 10 grounds. And then we have the 10 practices. And practice here is very different from what we mean by practice. So what we mean by practice is, how do you sit? How do you chant? How do you do prostrations? How do you work with kongans? We are very specific about practices. Okay, here's a whole bunch of sitting practices. See which one fits you, right? But I talked to Tony Prince about, because I read his book Universal Enlightenment. I've read it many times, and we've corresponded over the years, and I wrote to him and I said, what do you mean by practice? What are the practices of Huayan Buddhism? And he said, well, I told you in my book. And I said, yeah, but what are they? Because I'm thinking in terms of, well, how do you meditate? What do you do with your mind? What do you do with your body? How do you hold your hands? How do you hold your head? What thoughts, what are you doing a mantra? Are you asking a great question? That's what I'm thinking of practice. So no, that's not what they mean by practice. So practice sort of is an action thing in the world. Here are the 10 practices: giving delight, bestowing benefits, non-resentment, inexhaustible practice, transcending ignorance and confusion, skillful manifestation, non-attachment, veneration, cultivation of good qualities, cultivation of truth. So we would say these are the byproducts of practice, or in some cases, like inexhaustible practice, this is the, what you have to do to practice. But these are the practices. So it's practice in a different sense. And then, so that was, which chapter? That was chapter 21. And then chapter 22 is the 10 inexhaustible treasuries. Faith, ethical conduct, repentance, shame, knowledge of the Dharma, generosity, wisdom, mindfulness, retaining knowledge, and eloquence. And many of these we recognize as like ethical conduct, faith, repentance, mindfulness, wisdom, generosity. Some of these are paramitas, like generosity and wisdom and mindfulness. Some of them, like ethical conduct, that is all the precepts in there. Some of them are a little bit foreign to Zen, like we don't talk about shame very much, if at all. But anyway, those are the 10 inexhaustible treasuries. And then chapter 25 is the 10 transferals of merit, or the 10 dedications. Protect all beings, or but hey, they're no beings. Indestructible dedication, equal with the Buddhas, universal dedication, universal compassion, inexhaustible store of merit, selfless good deeds, all beings equal, but in Bodhichitta, tata, understanding essential nature, that's the nature of the Buddha, liberation and inexhaustibility of Dharma realm. And then chapter 26 is extremely important. These are the 10 stages of the Buddha, of becoming a Buddha. And for many people, chapter 26 is the key to the most important chapter in the Avatamsaka Sutra. Now, Zen Master Sung-san and most Zen practitioners would see the Yogacara, the teaching of mind alone, as the essence of the Avatamsaka Sutra. But many Buddhists see the 10 stages as the essence. So there's dana, joyful giving, there's immaculate behavior or morality, there's brilliance or patience, there's blazing or diligence. I'm giving these different translations because they both kind of appear together. The unconquerable, which is the four truths, that's the Four Noble Truths, and the two truths, which is the absolute and the relative. Interdependent origination, abiding in a nirvana, acting in samsara, which in some sense is the whole point of this sutra. Awakening to perception, being as a dream. True wisdom, Dharma cloud, with the universal reign of Dharma. So that's the 10 stages. Then there's the 10 concentrations, which I'm not going to give, the 10 supernormal powers, which I'm not going to state, telepathy, seeing at a distance, hearing at a distance, so on. There's the 10 types of patience. And then there's the 2,000 types of wisdom, and I'll tell you how that goes. This is chapter 28. So let's see, page 1023. 1023. Okay. So it starts out where I'm sorry, it's chapter 38. What's that? Oh yeah. So essentially, Manjushri asked Samantabhadra, please tell us, and now he lists 200 questions. What are the reliances of great enlightening, of great bodhisattvas? What are their extraordinary thoughts? What are their practices? What are their spiritual friends? I won't read you all 200. And it goes down to why do they demonstrate the conquering of demons? What are the attainments of the power of the enlightened? How do they turn the wheel of the teaching? How are the good and pure ways acquired due to the turning of the wheel of teaching? Why do the enlightened ones manifest extinction in final nirvana? Please explain these things to us. And to every one of these 200 questions, Samantabhadra gives 10 answers. So that's 2,000 types of wisdom. And these, especially the books 13 to 18, which is the Bodhisattva path, and the 10 stages, book 26. This is where the Avatamsaka Sutra is extremely different from Zen teaching, because there is this progress towards liberation. You have to go through these stages. You have to have these particular qualities. You have to have these particular, attributes, and you develop them over time. And this is very different from Zen. Now, what happens in the sutra is people, beings, they're not all people, beings develop these over time, and then suddenly, boom, they've awakened. So there's that similarity. That last boom, that's what Zen talks about. But this notion, not just of gradual, because certain types of Zen, like Soto Zen, talks about gradual awakening, but it's not in stages. It's not first you do this, then you do this, then you do that. Whereas in the Avatamsaka Sutra, it's very clear that there are these stages, and you have to go through these stages. And so that's a great difference between the Avatamsaka Sutra and Zen. But Zen does get a lot from the Avatamsaka Sutra. And let me check off how far I got here. And so that, plus other things in the Avatamsaka Sutra, is what we'll talk about next time. But I do want to say a minor thing. I said that I really like chapter 30. And the reason I like chapter 30, I just have to indulge myself. Page 889. 889. Come on, you can do it. 889. You're there. I know you're there. There you are. Okay. At that time, the enlightening being Mind King, I guess that's Manjushri, said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, the Buddhas speak of incalculable, measureless, boundless, incomparable, innumerable, uncountable, unthinkable, immeasurable, unspeakable, untold numbers. What are these?" And the Buddha said, "It is good that you ask. In order to have the beings of this world penetrate the meaning of the numbers known to the Buddha, listen carefully and think well about this. I will explain for you." And then the Buddha says, 10 to the 10th power times 10 to the 10th power equals 10 to the 20th power. 10 to the 20th power times 10 to the 20th power equals 10 to the 40th power. 10 to the 40th power times 10 to the 40th power equals 10 to the 80th power. 10 to the 80th power times 10 to the 80th power equals 10 to the power of 160. And he goes on, giving the law of how to multiply using exponents. And he goes, that squared is 10, further down, that squared is 10 to the power of 671,626,240. That squared is 10 to the power, and he goes on and on like that. And then he goes, that squared is 10 to the power, and he goes on and 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 on like that. And he finally gets, that squared is 10 to the power of, I can't even read the number, 101, 493, 292, 610, 318, 652, 755, 325, 638, 410, 240. That squared is an incalculable. An incalculable to the fourth power is a measureless. A measureless to the fourth power is a boundless. A boundless to the fourth power is an incomparable. An incomparable to the fourth power is an innumerable. An innumerable to the fourth power is an unthinkable. An unthinkable to the fourth power is an immeasurable. An immeasurable to the fourth power is an unspeakable. An unspeakable to the fourth power is an untold, which is unspeakably unspeakable. An untold multiplied by itself is a square untold. So the idea is you get far enough in finite numbers, you're at infinity. And of course, before retirement, I was an active mathematician. Jennifer says, of course, this is, have I ever tested the math? I don't have to test the math. Ancient India, they were nuts about number theory. They were absolutely nuts about number theory. So I believe it. And my calculator on my computer can't calculate those numbers anyway. But yeah, they were nuts about number theory. But what I find interesting is that when you go far enough out in the finite, suddenly you're in the infinite in some sense. And there was a philosopher of mathematics named Jessen Volpin, who that was his philosophy. You get far enough out in the, into the unspeakably unspeakable, and since you can't talk about it, therefore it's infinite. So that's kind of, so if it's too big to say, then it's infinite. So I just find that kind of amusing. But it is interesting, that they were just nuts about mathematics, and they were wonderful mathematicians. And it makes its way into the Avatamsaka Sutra. So this is a good place to stop. And then next month, it'll be the fourth weekend of the month, fourth Saturday of the month. What we'll talk about is what Zen takes for the Avatamsaka Sutra, what in the Avatamsaka Sutra is basic to all of the Mahayana, and some other cool stuff, including my really favorite chapter, Book 33, The Inconceivable Qualities of Buddhas, and also talk a little bit more about where this is in our chants. So I see one more. Does 0 equals don't know? No. That's a quick answer. Anyway, yeah, don't know doesn't really appear in this. Don't know comes more, I think, from China than from the Mahayana. But there are other ways in which the Mahayana questions our perception of reality. And I'll get to that next time. In fact, I'll write that down. So that was a lot of talking on my part. Does anyone have any questions that, okay, I'm thinking of how, the extent how to include it. Oh yeah, this is a very big contrast to the Pali Canon. Yes, the Pali Canon talks a lot about what you do, our notion of practice, how you practice. You do this, you do this, you do this, and not here. Yeah, this is as far from the Pali Canon as you can possibly get. Yeah, absolutely. So, what was this? Oh, Yogacara. Spelled just like you did a Yogac, no H, Araya. Yogacara. So the C is pronounced like a CH. And the two main schools of the Mahayana are Yogacara and Madhyamaka, with the middle way. And Zen combines the two. And most practicing Buddhists would not say, I'm in the Yogacara school, I'm in the, it infuses all of the Mahayana. Both schools infuse, but in particular in Zen, both are very important. So, okay. Are there any other questions? And you can unmute yourself if you want to. But
I had a question in the chat.
yeah. Oh, did I not see it? Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, Korean poet Ko-un.
Is there a one-line chant for the Avatamsaka Sutra?
Yeah, I'm looking for your.
No, because you sent it to me, Eileen.
I resent it
Okay.
to Kansas.
Let me. Oh, if you send it to Kansas Zen Center, you send it to Stan, who's recording this.
Oops.
You have to send it to me. Okay, let's wait for Eileen's question.
Judy.
Yeah. Is there a one-line chant? Okay. I don't think that there's a one-line chant. So what Eileen is talking about is the Lotus Sutra is condensed into one-line Namo Renge Kyo by the devotees of the Lotus Sutra school, and that's their practice. Their practice is chanting Namo Renge Kyo. And I do not know of any such condensation of the Avatamsaka Sutra. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that I don't know about it. And it's a good question. And you're in Singapore, where there probably are people who practice the Avatamsaka Sutra, so you can ask one of them and then let the rest of us know. So thank you.
Can you type the Madhyamaka, however you said that? Can you put that in the chant or in the chat box so I can see how it's spelled?
I don't know if I would spell it right, but
Probably closer to what I tried to do.
I believe that's how it's done.
Mika.
Yeah. Or it might be Majjhimika. I think it's Majjhimaka.
Mika.
It is Mika? Okay. See, I misspelled Majjhimika. I misspelled that and mispronounced it. It means middle way. And that's the school associated with Nagarjuna.
So how do they practice this sutra? I mean, do they just read a little bit a day, or
I don't know.
Practice? How did it? No.
I know that it's chanted, and I know that nobody chants the whole thing because you'd miss breakfast, lunch, dinner. You wouldn't go. You wouldn't sleep. I mean, Now I believe that in that part of monastic training in Korea consists of chanting either the whole sutra or parts of it, but it's stretched out over time. I know that traditional monastic training involves a lot of chanting of sutras. In Chinese, if you're in China, Korea, not so much Japan, because in Japan the dominant sect is Zen, and Zen doesn't go in for that much sutra chanting. But yeah, so that's another thing to try to find out if somebody has a way of finding out.
I'm looking at a website for the City of 1,000 Buddhas.
Oh yeah,
City of 10,000 Buddhas.
Yes,
which is Avatamsaka Sutra Recitation Dharma Assembly.
Yeah, but what does that mean?
There is a talk, but this is just the front page. To read the entire talk, please click.
Yeah. So that's a talk about it, but yeah, so that's one place to look. So the City of 10,000 Buddhas, that was Chan Master Xuan Hua. Yeah, and he was a very famous and charismatic guy. He went up to the part of the marijuana country and Ukiah, and he founded this extremely traditional, very tight monastic place. It does have both men and women, I believe, which makes it a little bit untraditional. And he's quite an interesting character, and his books are very interesting because on the one hand he's Chan, so he has that, but on the other hand he's real big into like mystical, magical stuff. And we have a book about his life where people tell these stories about how he looked at an injured dog and the dog was healed, kind of thing. So yeah. And City of 10,000 Buddhas is an incredibly traditional Chinese temple right in the heart of marijuana country in Ukiah. And our son went to a circus camp near there, and Stan and I actually went, we went into there, and we went to their bookshop, the places that were public. And yeah. So yeah, Chan Master Hua is a good guy to look up. So anything else? Okay, well, I'll see you in like about 4 weeks or something like that. And whatever it is, I'll put it up. And thank you very much. And thank you for your questions. And next time will be more philosophical, so probably you'll have more questions and more comments. So thank you very much, everybody.
If you're interested in listening to the chant, I know that